Hello YouTube, this is Dazzathecameraman. Today is Friday, July 21st, 2017. Welcome to the Hangout to discuss one of the recent videos by Nibiru Planet X, The Awakening, Nibiru News, also known as Scott, and Dr. Albers. I've got a number of people with me in the Hangout. I've got Astronomy Live, Sean Hufford, and we've got Jerry from Truth Trigger along here as well. I'm also in the Hangout again as a second participant on my laptop, so I can share my screen more easily. Welcome along, guys. Thank you for joining me. It looks like you're all muted at the moment.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, now,
hello again.
Thank you, guys. Now, some of our participants have got some background noise happening at the moment, so they've got their microphones muted until they're talking. So I'm going to, first of all, let's take a look at the video that is under discussion. I'll just present that screen to everyone. And let me just check the live feed that's coming up. There is a bit of a delay. Yes, it is. So you're all seeing that in the chat. Just confirm for me in the chat you're seeing everything okay. Now, in this video, if you've seen this, this was uploaded on July 19th, 2017 by Nibiru Planet X, The Awakening. There it is there with his usual plea for donations for his physicist, of course, because they have to look after the physicist and, you know, keep her watered and fed and all the rest of it. Very important cash cow is the physicist. So we can see in the video here, near the start, the video is about 51 minutes long, and at 4 minutes 50, we start seeing these images, supposedly, of brown dwarfs. So let's play a little bit of the video and just bear with me while I try and get this going. Oh, by the way, I should mention that, yes, I did send an invite out to Scott from Nibiru Planet X 20, The Awakening, as he calls himself now. And I'll share a screenshot with you about that shortly, but he replied in no uncertain terms what to do with my invite. And he sent me basically a pornographic image to represent what he wants me to do with the Hangout. So based on that, I'm rather reluctant to actually send him the Hangout link because he may actually abuse it, such as posting porn, which has happened before, which I believe was Scott. I was doing a Hangout with somebody else, and we put the link in the chat, and this person joined, which I believe was Scott. And he crashed it with porn, so we actually had to delete that out of the video. So I'll try and play a bit of this this video. Just bear with me as I get the sound settings correct.
And keep in mind, Claudia was part of that invitation as well. I wanted to point that out.
Absolutely. Now, just bear with me. I've got to get the audio right on this as I'm swapping between my PC and computer. Just let me know if you can hear this.
We're not hearing anything on the live stream.
Okay.
I did hear something for a second.
Here real quick. Okay. This is the Hinode
Okay, it's working now.
spacecraft, which is a Japanese and NASA venture.
Yes. Now,
So,
if you look down here, folks, just so you know, we're not playing any games. Right down here, follow my cursor. Here is the timestamp for the date, June 25th, and that is 6:05:41. Okay, this is taken directly from the Helio viewer. You can see their logo right here in the corner. Now, here's the deal, folks. Whoever was operating the camera at this time, they were zooming in on these objects that you see on your screen. the dark circular objects. Now, your first thought would be, oh, those have to be sunspots. Well, no, because the sunspot is right here. Okay, where I'm circling right in front of you. That is the sunspot. Now, later on, you're going to see these objects. You're going to see these objects move across the sun. And there's even more evidence on top of that. So just hold your pants on.
Yeah.
Now, this is a wider view. Again, timestamp down in the lower left-hand corner. This is just this June 25th. Now, once again, they were photographing these three objects. Now, you can clearly see, I'll zoom in just a little bit so it doesn't pixelate. You can clearly see these objects are not on the sun. And to have three objects in a perfect line would be, that would be nearly impossible. You can see this object here, zoom in, it's clearly raised up, it's passing by. So is this object, so is this object. Try to zoom in as much as possible. Now this object over here, again, it's not on the surface of the sun. It's passing by.
Yes, I think it's passing by in the sun's corona. And don't forget, the sun's corona is made out of diffuse. It's diffuse. It's a plasma. And so when a solid object like this passes by it, we would see things that look like holes in the corona. But you can see the object is not far from the sun because you can actually see some of the gas or the plasma. It's around the outline of the object. So part of the object is covered by some corona plasma, if we look at it closely. So these objects are basically in the sun's corona.
Yeah, absolutely, very interesting what we're taking a look at, what we're finding. Now,
just be with me.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll probably play some more of that in a moment, but let's just discuss what we've seen so far. Now, I'll just step this back to the earlier image. Now, he pointed out that we had these three objects all in a straight line, and he seemed to make a lot of importance out of that, as if, you know, these have to be real objects because they're in a straight line, which is incredible to me that, you know, he would jump to that conclusion. But then he zoomed out and we see that there was actually a fourth object over here, which he sort of hesitated about and then seemed to include it as being one of these so-called objects. I noticed that he didn't say anything about this apparent object up here as well, but I'm going to come back to that later. We also heard Dr. Albers, or Claudia, giving her analysis of what she was seeing, and she talked about how when we were zoomed up on them, you could actually see the plasma of the sun's corona around these objects, which proved that they were close to the sun. Well, it's very interesting because we're going to take a look at some earlier images from the Hinaday satellite soon, and we're going to see some interesting things that are revealed. And it's actually no wonder that Scott has refused with such hostility to actually come on the Hangout, because he knows what he's about to get. Just like all of his other claims about brown dwarfs and the solar system. And, you know, this all started back in October last year when he played a video supposedly showing planet Enoch passing over in front of the sun, which of course turned out to be our own moon, seen from one of the stereo spacecraft as it was leaving the Earth on its way out to its orbit around the sun. Guys, would you like to make any comments on what you're seeing so far?
Oh, sorry, I was just going to make a shameless plug for one of my latest videos on my channel showing that it was the moon in 2007 from Stereo Behind, and doing a reanalysis of the original raw FITS files and matching it up perfectly with the surface features of the moon, proving that it really was the moon.
Right, so Astronomy Live has done some very thorough analysis of that video, so do check that out on Astronomy Live's channel. And this is where it all really goes back to October of last year when I started looking at Nibiru Planet X's videos and his claims. So anybody else want to add anything on that before we move on?
Well, just that if I did see this in one image on one satellite, the first thing I would do is check, several of the dozen other satellites to see if these mysterious objects showed up.
Right. So with that in mind, and before I move on to the other images which are really going to blow the lid on all of this, let's talk about what we're actually seeing here, where we're seeing it from. So first of all, this is from the Hinidae satellite space telescope, which is actually in orbit around the Earth. So unlike the stereo A and stereo B, the stereo ahead, stereo behind satellites, which are in orbit around the Sun, this Hinidae space telescope is actually in orbit around the Earth. So this is in effect a view from the Earth.
If I can jump in, Dazza?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Well, if you think back to when we actually did our simultaneous observation of a sunspot last year, these splotches, these little spheres, as Scott calls them, are larger than that sunspot that we observed. And that would mean that if there's physical objects blocking the sun, like a transit of Venus or Mercury, with just a standard solar filter in the naked eye, you would actually be able to see these.
Absolutely. Yep. And I'm going to come back to that point very soon as well. So
Okay.
what I'll do now is I've got the view from the sun looking back towards the Earth, just so we can put things in perspective. I'll just pull up Starry Night for you so we can take a look at that. And hopefully that is visible in the Hangout. I'll just check. There is a delay. Sometimes graphics don't display properly, so I'll just make sure that's coming through. Yes, it is. I can see that in the live feed. So here is the view of the Earth from the sun. It's at the current date and time, July 20th, 2017, 2320 minutes up there in the left-hand corner. And you can see the Earth, and you can see this blue line here, which is actually the orbit of Hinidae. So Hinidae is at an orbit of, as I recall, in fact, let me just check that so I get it exactly right for you. It's at an altitude above the Earth of approximately 680 kilometers. It has a perigee of 671 kilometers and apogee of 698 kilometers. So that's the closest and furthest point from the Earth. So approximately 680 kilometers above the Earth. By comparison, the International Space Station is at an altitude of about 400 kilometers. Okay, so let me run this forward a little bit, and let me just, okay, so I'm going to run this forward at a faster speed so that we can see the Hinidae hurtling around the Earth in its orbit. It takes, let me see, 98 minutes to make one orbit around the Earth. So there we go. Now you'll notice that as it's going over the top there and it's coming around the side of the Earth, at this point in time, it's actually just sort of skirting behind the south pole of the Earth as it heads round. So there are times that the satellite can't actually see the sun because the Earth is in the way. Okay, so now having shown you that, I'm going to zoom out, and we've got another blue line there, and that's actually the SDO. That's the Solar Dynamics Observatory, and you can see that it's actually much further out from the Earth than Hinidae is. And if I zoom out even further and we look left and right, then we will see Looking out to the left, there is stereo behind. And out to the right there is stereo ahead. And these ones are in orbit around the sun, not around the Earth. So that's just to put that into perspective there. Anything you guys want to add before I move on?
No, you may have already said it. I didn't catch it, but it is end of day is in a sun synchronous orbit.
So would you like to just explain that, Astronomy Live?
Well, basically, it's a polar type of orbit that matches as best as possible synchrony with the sun, so that it basically maximizes the amount of time it gets in the sun. ISS goes through periods where it gets pretty good time in the sun too, called beta. It's based on the beta angle. And actually, back when the space shuttle was flying, it could not dock to the space station when it was in those time periods, because the station was getting almost constant exposure to the sun, which conflicted with the thermal requirements for the space shuttle. So anyway, that's a lengthy little tidbit there. But basically, the orbit is designed to maximize that angle and maximize its exposure to the sun.
Right. Okay, anything else from the other guys?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Yep. All right. So let me just pull up the information about Hinaday there. That's from n2yo.com. You've got all the information there that I went over. You've got the perigee and apogee information there, the inclination of the orbit. Get rid of that highlighting. There we go. So that's the altitude above the Earth and so on, launch date and all the rest of it. And down the bottom here, we've got a two-line element, which I've been able to use to import into Starry Night, which gives us the view in Starry Night there. That's the orbital data. Okay. So moving along, looking at these so-called brown dwarfs across the sun, which, and remember that this was on June 25th is the date of the imagery here, which is along the bottom. Of course, the player's in the way at the moment. So let me pull up the view direct from Helio Viewer. And this is for the same date and time as the image, obviously the same one as I flick backwards and forwards. And so there's a comparison. It's the same image. And you see, so we've got the date set to June 25th, 2017. And at 5:04, and what have I done there? I've gone and changed the date on it somehow. 25th of June. Hopefully that'll pull it back up, XRT. Okay, I don't know why that's gone and changed on me. But anyway, I've saved some still images from Helio Viewer. Now, the problem with this particular telescope is that, as you can see, like this view that we've got at the moment, the images are very hit and miss as to whether you get a full screen view of the sun. And I've saved some images. Let me pull those up for you. And we're going to take a closer look. So here we go. Here are the images that I've saved from Helio Viewer. And let's start with this one here. I'm just going to drag that over. Okay, so that's the same image that we start with. Now, note carefully the position of these objects, which are supposed to be brown dwarfs, okay? So we've got 1, 2, 3, and then we've got this fourth one here that he also pointed out. And we've got this large one up here as well, which he didn't point out. That's the full screen from the Helio Viewer, just so that we've got all the data there as well. And now you note that when I toggle backwards and forwards between any images, so this is our starting image on June 25th, 2017. This is the one that Scott used in his video. And this one here is on May the 12th, 2017. So the previous month, And what do we notice about our brown dwarfs? They're all in exactly the same place on the image sensor. Wow, isn't that bizarre? You'd think that after a number of weeks that they would actually be in a different position, wouldn't you? Guys, do you want to make a comment at this point?
Well, personally, when I manage to catch something on a camera and it doesn't move when I move the camera, my first conclusion is that it's something in the camera, not that it's something out in outer space that's moving with the camera. That would be the first logical conclusion.
Well, it would certainly seem to be a logical conclusion, and we're going to test that conclusion to see if it's actually the correct conclusion. But here we have an example, again, of where Scott jumps on a single image without actually doing any background checks on what he's actually seeing, doing any simple tests. I mean, let's face it, this only took me a couple of minutes on HelioViewer, and I have to say I'm not really that familiar with HelioViewer. I've almost never used it. I tend to use the Stereo A, Stereo B, and SDO archives rather than HelioViewer, but it didn't take me very long to work out what was going on, and others have checked into this as well. So let's step back through some more images. So it's our starting image, the one we've already looked at. Here is another one. This one is on April the 9th, 2017. So it's a couple of months back. And what do we see when we flick backwards and forwards? We see that our brown dwarfs are still in exactly the same place. They haven't moved at all. Now, while this is all happening, of course, the Earth is orbiting the Sun. Takes 365.25 days for the Sun to make for the Earth to make one orbit around the Sun. We know that there's 360 degrees in a circle, so you know we do approximately 1 degree of travel in our orbit around the Sun each day. So in 1 month we've traveled approximately 30 degrees around the Sun in our orbit, and our view is actually different by 30 degrees. In 3 months' time, of course, we're a quarter of the way around our orbit around the Sun, and our view of the Sun is 90 degrees difference approximately from where we started. And in 6 months' time, we're actually on the other side of the Sun looking back in the opposite direction. But what do we see here? We find that when we flick between the images, our brown dwarfs are in exactly the same place as when we started without actually moving. So this would seem to confirm what Astronomy Live has suggested as a conclusion, that we're actually looking at something on the image sensor rather than in space. But let's step back some more and see if we've got any more images. And again, this one is from April the 9th. The camera seems to move around a little bit. I'm no expert on Hinaday. I don't know if maybe Jerry or Astronomy Live or others can offer some more insight onto what's going on there. But in all of these images, when we step through, we can see that our brown dwarf objects, according to Scott and his astrophysicist, Dr. Claudia Albers, the expert, haven't seemed to notice that these brown dwarfs actually remain in exactly the same place every time. Isn't that bizarre? So I've stepped through a number of images here. This one actually goes back to October 27, 2016. And even then we see that our brown dwarf objects are in exactly the same place. Did I hear somebody wanting to make a comment there?
When did the satellite get launched?
2006.
2006, there we go.
How far back have you gone and seen these brown dwarves always in the same spots?
I've gone back as far as 2016, and I'm going to come back with some more information on that soon. But as I say, going through HelioViewer, it's very hit and miss as to whether you get a full screen object like the one that we're looking at the moment. Sometimes you get just a little square of the Sun instead of the full image. So there might be an easier way. As I said, I'm not that familiar with HelioViewer. I also did try downloading some movies to try and make it easier. But I've pulled up the best of the images that I could find at this point. Okay, any other comments before I move on?
So one other thing I would point out is that Hinaday, being in an orbit around the Earth, has an orbital radius of about, 7,000 kilometers or so. And so you would expect a significant amount of parallax just from that alone. An example of this would be Hubble's famous image of Comet ISON, where it tracked the stars instead of the comet. And the comet took on not only a streak shape, but a bent streak shape, bent by parallax from Hubble's orbit. And so over the course of half an orbit, Hubble had moved so much that even as far away as Comet ISON was at the time, it still produced a significant amount of parallax in the image of ISON. And we would expect the same thing here if this were a real object in space, because Hinaday is going around the Earth, every hour and a half or so, or whatever the exact orbital period is, and so it doesn't take very long for it to build up a noticeable amount of parallax for any solar system object between us and the Sun.
Right, and the astrophysicist Dr. Claudia Albers doesn't seem to have managed to factor that into her calculations, it seems.
No, certainly not, which is not what you would expect for a professional physicist.
Okay, yeah, let's move on, and it's obvious that these objects or apparent objects are actually on the image sensor itself. I think that would be a safe conclusion. But is there any further evidence that we've got to back up that conclusion? Well, of course, this is a group effort with a number of different people all contributing, which I very much appreciate. And we've got Robert Lockwood in the chat, I see. Thank you, Robert. Robert sent me an email with some very helpful information, and we're going to look at that information now as well. So let me just pull that up for you. This is the information that Robert sent me, and info, contamination on the CCD. A significant amount of contaminant accumulation was observed on the CCD. Now I'll just explain what a CCD is. That is the image sensor of the camera charge coupled device, is what CCD stands for. So a significant amount of contaminant accumulation was observed on the CCD surface during the initial phase of the mission. CCD bakeout operations were regularly performed every 3 weeks after February 2008. The source of the contaminants is likely to be a plasticizing agent used in the telescope tube or in the filter wheel assembly, but it has not yet been identified. The growth rate of the contaminants and their effects on the spectral and temperature response of the telescope was studied by Narukagi et al. 2011. Their results are now included in the XRT standard analysis software for coronal temperature diagnostics. Although most of the contaminants are removed by the regular CCD bakeout operations, a considerable number of small agglomeration of the contaminants or droplets are left unremoved on the CCD and observed as dark spots on the X-ray images. To these spots, which cover approximately 5% of the full CCD area, correction can be applied for browsing purposes. And Robert has supplied the link, which you can see there, and I can put that link in the description under this hangout. Robert sent further information. The black dots are a combination of dust particles and contamination spots. Both are stuck to the surface of the CCD and prevent the light from reaching the chip. The dust particles have been seen since launch, while the contamination spots appeared 8 months after launch following a CCD bakeout. The spots are removed by interpolating the surrounding pixels into the dark areas. This is not a rigorous removal, but is simple and produces an unblemished image because they are always in the same place on the chip. Scientists working with the images don't use those areas for their analysis. Since 2012, the dust particles appear to be slowly growing in size. The clue is that the spots do not move on the CCD. And there it is. The clue is that the spots do not move on the CCD. If these so-called objects were real objects around the sun, they would move. There is no way that you can have an object orbiting the sun that is not going to move. And it's not going to remain in a fixed position in relation to other orbitals or other brown dwarfs. So why don't we now talk about the problems that we would have if these black dots were actually objects orbiting the sun? Astronomy Live, do you want to expand on that?
Well, we would see major disruptions to the orbits of the planets. I haven't even run a simulation with that many brown dwarfs in the inner solar system before. I'd be curious to see what that would do. As it is, if you put a brown dwarf anywhere in the inner solar system, the planets immediately start showing noticeable perturbations. And we just do not see that. The planets are where they should be. Our go-to telescopes still work at finding them, and if we measure their positions astrometrically, they're right where they're predicted to be.
Right. Now, the orbital period of Mercury, as I recall, is about 88 days, just off the top of my head. Now, supposedly, these brown dwarfs are much closer to the sun. We heard Scott's expert astrophysicist, Dr. Claudia Albers, claiming that we could clearly see that the plasma of the sun was around the brown dwarfs. Therefore, they were very close to the sun. So what would we expect if these were actually brown dwarfs? And she did go on to say that they were 4 times the size of the Earth. I don't recall that she talked about the mass, but having said that, I haven't watched a full video yet. But what would we expect for an object like a brown dwarf so close to the sun that it was actually within the corona to actually stay in orbit? How fast would it be orbiting the sun?
Oh, I'd have to do the math on that, but it'd be pretty darn quick. I mean, like you said, Mercury's orbit's pretty darn fast, and it's much further away than what she's claiming. So we should be seeing significant motion very rapidly in these images, if it were really there in the corona.
Right, so these objects would have to be absolutely streaking around the sun at high speed to actually remain in orbit around the sun, correct?
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying that these objects would have to be absolutely streaking around the sun to actually remain in orbit around the sun, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Otherwise, they're just going to fall into the sun. But then again, Claudia seems to think that gravity itself doesn't dictate the motions of the planets, which is demonstrably false.
So there we have a supposed astrophysicist saying that the gravity doesn't actually dictate the motion of the planets. That is incredible, is it not? Okay, now the other thing is that the sun rather, actually does a little wobble in the center of the solar system. We often think of the sun as being fixed right at the center of the solar system, unmoving. But in fact, the sun does a little wobble because of the pull of the larger planets, such as Jupiter and Saturn. The sun is actually located at what is called the barycenter, or the center of gravity of the solar system. And I would imagine that if the sun had 5 huge, massive brown dwarf objects orbiting very close around it, the sun would be doing quite a significant wobble in the middle of our solar system, aside from the facts that Astronomy Live has already pointed out that it would be perturbing the orbits of the planet as well. Jerry, did you want to add anything to this before we move on?
No, I think that actually that article about the black dots on the CDD nails it.
Right. Okay, so we're going to look at some other points here as well.
Actually, I got one thing to add. Can you say when that article was written?
Let me click the link, see if I can pull that up.
This is just for clarity for the audience, because this is supposedly something new that Scott's claiming, but I want to see how old this article is about those dots on the CCD.
Okay, so here is the PDF that the information is taken from. And I have to say I haven't had time. There we go. Received 30th of March 2015, accepted 23rd of November 2015. Okay, so this goes back a couple of years. It's coming up almost 2 years now.
So there's been a study on these dots for at least 2 years.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, as a professional scientist myself, as someone who works in science as a scientist, one of the first things you should always do as a scientist is look in the literature to see if someone else has already figured out the answer. Like, that is the first knee-jerk reaction any professional scientist should have, is to look in the literature, see what's published before making claims. So it's just simply beyond the pale astounding to see someone who claims to be a professional physicist making claims like this that are easily understood and debunked by looking literature at papers that were published years ago.
Exactly. Now you can see I've just highlighted the section that Robert Lockwood sent me there in the email. So this is all legitimate. You saw me click on the link and open this document. So it is all legitimate there. Okay, so now we're going to look at some other images. Now I pointed out that the Hinode spacecraft, the Hinode Space Telescope, is actually in Earth orbit. So effectively our view of the sun from Hinode is the same as we would see from the Earth. The Hinode telescope is so close to the Earth it would make no difference really to our view, with a slight amount of parallax, as Astronomy Live mentioned. Now, these are images that I took back in 2012, as I recall, 6th of June, I think it was 2012, as I recall. Let me just see, that's a copy. Let me go to this one here, properties. Yep, June 2012. Okay, so the actual event was the 6th of June 2012. I took these screen grabs off the video a couple of days later. Let's take a look at some of these images. Now, this is the sun filmed through one of my video cameras using a welding lens as a solar filter. This is before I got hold of my proper beta solar filter, but you can see that even a welding lens does a very nice job as a solar filter if you get one that's of reasonable sort of quality. Now, this was during the Venus transit across the sun, and that large black dot that you see down there is actually the silhouette of Venus as it crossed over between the sun and the Earth. Now, it's important to note the size of Venus compared to the Earth. Venus is about 100 kilometers smaller in diameter compared to the Earth. So it is very close to the size of the Earth. It's only fractionally smaller than the Earth. I'm also going to show you a comparison of the planets. Let me find that. Where is it? Here we go. So here is a comparison of the planets next to the sun: Saturn, Jupiter, the Earth, and the Moon. We can see here that the Earth is very small. Now let me also bring up the comparison of Venus at the transit. And you can see that even though Venus is actually slightly smaller in physical size than the Earth, it's actually considerably larger here in silhouette when we saw it in transit. The reason being, of course, is that Venus was much closer to the sun than what the Earth is. And Venus is closer to the Earth, I think that's what I said. And being closer to the Earth, it looks bigger against the sun. So Dr. Albers claimed that these brown dwarfs were approximately 4 times the size of the Earth. Well, if Venus looks this big in transit against the sun at the distance of Venus away from the sun, then you can imagine that those brown dwarfs being 4 times the size of the Earth would be quite large against the sun as well. Now we've got some other images here. These ones here were taken from STO, which is why they're so nice and clear and sharp, well defined. And recently I've been taking some more images of the sun, as have other people. And let's have a look in the list view. View list. Okay, no, I want details, sorry. View details. So here are the dates of all of these photos that I've taken recently of the sun using my P900 and beta solar filter. So you can see that the oldest ones I took were on the 16th of June 2017, and right down the bottom I went out just before I started the hangout and took a few photos. So they're very latest images of the sun. Let's have a look at some of these images. So here are my own images of the sun using the beta solar filter, and we can see some sunspots there. It's these little spots here, but I'm not seeing any brown dwarfs. Now remember that Hinidae is in Earth orbit. So if there were brown dwarfs in front of the sun, I would expect to be able to see them, just like we saw Venus during the transit. Now this one here is interesting because we had a very large sunspot visible from the Earth in the last few days. It's now out of view, but you can clearly see that sunspot there, and no brown dwarfs. There's a zoomed in view. Just jump in, guys, if you want to make any comment as I go on. I know I'm talking a lot, so feel free to jump in and make any comment.
I'm just a little mad because you didn't include me in that little sunspot observation. I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah. Astronomy Live?
I was just going to say that, a lot of people claim incorrectly that brown dwarfs are absolutely invisible light and can never be seen in visible light, even though they would reflect the sun's light in truth. But even if you believe that, you're still talking about something here that should be blocking the sun's light. So we're not even talking about whether or not it would reflect the sun's light. We're talking about something that is claimed to be in front of the sun and therefore should be blocking the sun's light, absorbing it, blocking it, preventing it from being seen, therefore creating a silhouette. So even if you think that a brown dwarf can't be seen in visible light, it should still be seen as a silhouette as it crosses in front of the sun. Yet, clearly, there is no such object to be seen in front of the sun.
Absolutely. And that's a very important point. Even if a brown dwarf was magically, mysteriously invisible to light so that we couldn't see it except on crappy cell phone cameras and webcams, of course, because everybody knows that you can see brown dwarfs galore on crappy cell phone cameras and all-sky webcams. It's very mysterious. Apparently, very expensive astronomical telescopes and infrared cameras, such as the one Astronomy Live owns, is apparently incapable of seeing brown dwarfs within our solar system, but crappy cell phone cameras and webcams can. But having said that, all of that aside, even if we couldn't see it for some unknown reason, we should still be able to see it in silhouette, just like we saw Venus in silhouette. Yet we can't. All we see is the sun, and we see sunspots. Now this image that I've got up on my screen now is one of several images, and I'll step through them, that I took just before the hangout started. We've had some bad weather here in the last couple of days, and there was a bit of a break in the clouds. So I quickly grabbed the camera, ran outside, and took a few images. This was taken with my Nikon P900 and beta solar filter. And some of the images are better than others, depending on the cloud and the exposure. But again, we can't see any silhouettes of brown dwarfs in front of the sun. Now, you might say, well, maybe they're not there today, but remember that all of those images that we stepped through from the Hinidae telescope, the so-called brown dwarfs were always in exactly the same position in the image sensor. Mysteriously, they weren't in the same position on or around the sun, but they were in the same position on the image sensor. So no brown dwarfs to be seen on the sun or in front of the sun today, not through my telescope or camera at least. And I know that other people, Truth Nerd, Jeff from Truth Nerd, he's been posting some very good videos and photos of the sun recently. And I know that others frequently photograph the sun looking for sunspots and so on. And of course, we've also got the hydrogen alpha telescopes where you can actually look at the texture and surface of the sun in great detail. You can see the flares coming off it and so forth. And nobody is reporting seeing any brown dwarfs with those highly detailed images. Any other comments, guys?
Not really. I mean, I think you pretty much said it all there.
Yeah, I know. You're like leaving nothing for us.
Well, feel free to jump in and interrupt me if you want. I mean, I don't want to dominate it all, but yeah.
Are you charging $10 for this video, or is it going out free?
Oh,
yeah. Free information here, and yeah, people who are paying their $10 for the physicist toilet paper, I suggest that's all it's going to be good for, is very expensive toilet paper. It's not much good for anything else, and you've been ripped off by the sum of $10 if you've bought any of those papers. Now, I'll just post a bit of a warning here, because I'm going to show you the reply that I received just before the Hangout from Scott, and there is some offensive content in the email, and particularly in the accompanying image. So if you don't want to be offended, I suggest you look away now, and we're going to look at Scott's reply now. So first of all, here is the email that I sent Scott. And let me just drag that over. Okay, dear Scott and Dr. Albers, you're not scared of me, are you? I'll be sending you the Hangout link at about 10 minutes before the Hangout is due to start. It's 7 p.m. EDT, 2300 UTC. Cheers, Dazza. And the reply that I received from Scott with the accompanying image: no thanks, Dave, you're a shill and we don't have time for your games. I truly hope that someday soon you'll get what's coming to you, possibly like this picture of you and Jake. Seems like you're getting it really good from behind. I think that's meant to be, now do me a favor, David, and fuck off. So that was response from Scott from Nibiru Planet X, The Awakening, Nibiru News. I wonder if Dr. Claudia Albers, condones the sort of behavior from Scott. What do you think, guys?
I really doubt it, but you know, he has a nice double face going on with her.
Yeah, he sure has. So I'm just surprised that, you know, as a supposed professional, an astrophysicist she is supposed to be, Dr. Claudia Albers would associate with somebody like this. Now, we have touched on some of the history of Mr. Cohn in the past and his criminal history. I'm not going to get into that in any great detail here because that's already been covered, but he's made it quite clear to me in past emails that he has no shame about his criminal past. And he has actually posted threats to me as well. And you might recall that he even put a bounty on me at one stage.
$5,000 worth of it.
A $5,000 bounty on Dazzathecameraman. How about that? Now, I think there were some other screenshots I was hoping to show. Just of the, I'm not sure if I copied them over though, icons. Maybe not. Transit of Venus, Helio viewer, maybe it's in there. Okay, here we go. See if I can pull it up. So only 2 minutes after I posted my video, and again, there's a language warning on this. In fact, I'm not even sure I want to read this one out. People can read it for themselves if they want to view it. There we go. Language warning. This was the response from Scott from Nibiru Planet X, The Awakening, only 2 minutes after I uploaded my video last night, saying that I'd be doing this Hangout and inviting him to the Hangout. And you can see his foul-mouthed, expletive-ridden, threatening response there. And once again, I just wonder how Dr. Claudia Albers, being the professional she supposedly is, feels about these sort of responses from the person that she is associating herself with now.
Oh, I don't think he's ever taught her how to actually use YouTube comment system because, or he's just blocked her from being able to see your channel or whatever. Because if she saw half the stuff that he posts on your channel, on Astronomy Last channel, he hasn't posted on my channels in a while. So I guess I've been lucky, I guess. But yeah, I don't think she'd have anything to do with him. I mean, he's already talked his way out of his record with her. So she's not taking that warning about being a woman involved in his life. You know, the dangers involved in that. But yeah, she doesn't, I don't think she knows what all he says behind her back.
Well, Dr. Elbers, I suggest it's time that you start doing your background checks on Scott, because he has quite a colourful history, and there's no shortage of threats that he has made, credible threats to various people, myself included. And of course the sort of language he uses, and of course then he goes and uploads these videos where he claims, oh, he's the victim and all these trolls come to his channel and they say these disgusting, horrible things about him. But of course this comment that we're looking at on screen at the moment is very typical of the sort of thing that Scott says, and much worse. He seems to have singled out a few people. He's been particularly vitriolic to Mari from WTF Sky and some of the comments that he has made to her. This is the sort of person that we're dealing with. And let's face it, folks, this guy is a fraud, and he is milking this nonsense about brown dwarfs next to the sun for all he's worth. And Dr. Elbers is his cash cow. And he is milking that cash cow for all it's worth. Dr. Elbers is the goose that laid the golden egg. And it's very important that Scott looks after her, because, you know, she is his meal ticket at the moment. And being able to sell rip-off white papers for $10 a piece, which actually shows spots on the camera's CCD. He's actually milking it. And I have my suspicions that Dr. Elbers actually knows exactly what's going on here. I have my suspicions that she's actually just as bad as Scott. I've always said that you can always tell when Scott is lying because his lips are moving. And it seems to be the same thing with Dr. Elbers. I really can't believe that she actually believes that what she is saying is true. And if she really was an astrophysicist, it wouldn't take her very long to actually come to the same conclusion that I did and others did in a very short period of time, just by looking at past images and seeing that these spots in the images don't actually move on the image sensor. Guys, would you like to comment?
Nope, but I do have to get going here.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining Astronomy Live. You did let me know that you would have to take off after about 45 minutes. So thank you for joining us and sharing on that, and have a good day. Thank you.
Yep, have a good day, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Later. Talk to you later.
Yes.
And Dazza, as far as not adding a lot to this, I mean, you've got this pretty well covered on all bases here. There's not much I can add.
Right, thank you. And once again, I'd just like to give a shout out to Robert Lockwood for the information that he sent me about the spots, the detailed information about the spots on the CCD image there we saw in this article here. Thank you for that, Robert. Jerry, did you have anything that you wanted to add about this?
No, not really. There's just really nothing to debate here. I mean, it's so obvious.
Now, Jerry, you've actually done quite a bit of work looking at various videos that Scott has posted. Do you want to sort of add some further comment about some of the things that you've looked at and the results that you've come up with?
God, we could be here all night. I guess most of it is just not checking with the original data that's available to falsify almost all the claims she makes. and it doesn't take very long.
It doesn't take long at all, does it?
No.
No.
I think it all started when, you know, some of her original posts when she was talking about the SREM imaging, which she thought was a solar or a standard radiation environment monitor, which of course aren't on any NASA satellites. The monitors on NASA satellites are called IREMs, but the radiation monitors, they don't take pictures. So, you know, any article she puts out of dealing with SREM images, they're all falsified from the start.
Right. So I'm just stepping back through those images that we went through earlier. You can see the date and time down in the bottom left-hand corner for these various images. Just to recap, that the so-called brown dwarfs, the black spots that we were looking at in the images, don't actually change their positions. Are you familiar with they talked about doing a bake-off of the CCD? Are you familiar with any of that, Jerry?
Not so much on the stereo ones. They got it's called a cold finger, and what they do is they warm up the sensor. I believe it's up to like -12 degrees, then cool it back down again to the space environment.
Right. So there we have it.
So the bake-off, the bake-off isn't really a bake-off.
Right. But they have a process where they can try and mitigate the effects of dust and these spots on the CCD sensor, but obviously they can't get rid of them completely. So there is the original image that was in Scott's video with the brown dwarfs 1, 2, 3, and the fourth one, and the fifth one, which he failed to point out. And when we step back through these images, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and the fifth one up there again, all in exactly the same place, even though we're talking about months apart, and the Earth is actually orbited around the sun by probably about 30 degrees by this time. We're looking at a difference, an angle of about 90 degrees, and yet there they still are. So I think that is clearly debunked. The physicist, the astrophysicist, the professional Dr. Claudia Albers, cash cow, and golden goose egg layer for Scott of Planet X, The Awakening, has been debunked.
No, my question is, ooh, echo. When did she become an astrophysicist?
Well, my understanding was that she was supposedly a theoretical particle physicist. I'm not sure. Is that correct, Jerry? Do you know?
That's my understanding. That's my understanding. Yes.
Yep. And of course, I've always said that, yeah, theoretical particle physicist. It sounds like she's a particle physicist in theory. That's my take on it.
There actually is a title for a theoretical particle physicist. It's just nothing to do with it.
Yeah, that's right. But we can see clearly that when she is clearly stating that these black dots are actually brown dwarfs and giving a detailed analysis at $10 a pop and saying that we can clearly see that the plasma of the sun shows that these objects are in the sun's atmosphere or the chromosphere of the sun. It's absolute nonsense. These are spots on the camera CCD sensor. I mean, you know, it's pretty clear that this is a scam. This is a scam for money. That's what it's all about. So people, if you're sending your money to Scott from Nibiru Planet X, The Awakening, for white papers or supporting him, you're supporting a scammer. It's as simple as that. Okay, well, if there are any comments from the chat, I think we might wind this up soon. We've been going for approximately an hour. I don't like the Hangouts to go too long, otherwise they become too long for people to watch. If anybody has anything to add, any of the panel, any of the people in the chat, please go right ahead.
Oh, somebody had a good comment about a half hour ago, but it's well gone, and I didn't want to interrupt for it.
Do you remember what the comment was about?
See if I can scroll up and have that long of a history, but I doubt I'll find it. It was after my last comment, so I should be able to find it.
So I'd be interested to see any other photos that other people have taken of the sun in recent days, particularly if you've got any images that were taken on the same date as Scott's image, which was, what did I say? It was the 25th of June, this one here. If you've got any images of the sun taken on the 25th of June, I'd love to see them. And let's see if we've got these matching brown dwarfs, but obviously we've well and truly debunked that anyway because they don't move.
Well, unfortunately, I think I found the comment, but it was by darn right at 8:01. So it wasn't that long ago, but he's retracted the message, so I can't get the comment out.
Right.
You can check all these. You can check all these pictures.
We're getting a lot of echo from you, Dazza.
Go ahead, Jerry.
I said you can check all these pictures against the GOES satellite too. Just look for the raw images and it'll show you the full spectrum X-ray as these do, and you'll see there's no brown dwarfs.
Right, and as Robert Lockwood has just said, it's only on the Hinaday that you can see these spots. The good reason for that, of course, is that the spots are on the camera sensor on the Hinaday camera.
MMA had a good comment. Dr. Albers apparently said that brown dwarfs are dead stars. They claim to be an astrophysicist. Kind of mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brown dwarfs are failed stars.
Yep. She is a fraud. Just like Scott is a fraud. As I say, birds of a feather flock together, and this is exactly what they're doing. Okay, well, I think I'll wind things up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in the chat. And thank you, Sean and Jerry, for joining me. Thank you to Astronomy Live for joining me earlier as well. And we look forward to having another expose of the next steaming fresh pile of fair porn from Scott from Nibiru Planet X. No doubt he'll keep us entertained for months to come.
It just doesn't sound right if you don't add the 2016 at the end of that.
Okay, so thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.